welcome to Accent on Art. I'm Chris Madison, and our guest artist today is Richard Lack of the Atelier Lack. I understand, Mr. Lack, that you're having a grand celebration of Atelier Lack. About 20 years?
Yes, this is our 20th anniversary, and in order to celebrate that, we're having a special concert by a star of the Metropolitan Opera who's volunteered. His name is Tim Jenkins. He's a young Heldon tenor. He was the youngest person to sing Parsifal at the Metropolitan Opera. So he's a wonderful singer, and he's going to give a concert for us on this coming Friday.
What date is that?
I believe that's, what is Friday? The 18th.
Yes.
18th. So
And
we're
where is
very
it going
happy
to be?
about St. Paul's Episcopal Church on Lake of the Isles.
So he's doing this as a complimentary concert
That's right. Yeah,
to help you out,
right,
to help the organization?
He's been very interested in the tradition that we represent, and in many ways it's very similar to the operatic tradition. So he has kindly, as I say, consented to come up and do a wonderful benefit concert for us. So we're very pleased about it. We'll also have kind of a special student show of work and a few other things going on to celebrate.
How many students are there at Atelier Lack?
Well, there are really two aspects to the studio. One is our full-time apprentice program, and currently we have 10 students. The other is our evening and part-time classes, which run in the summer and during the week in the evenings. And I think generally we'd have, on average, about 120 people going through.
Really?
So it's, and that's open to
more than anticipated.
Right. It's open to anybody that is interested in this tradition.
Where's it located?
It's at Hennepin Lake, right next to the Uptown Theater.
Oh, all right. That's a very glowing area.
Yes, it's an exciting area. It's our little bit of Paris, I suppose.
Oh, all right. Well, tell me, how does the term atelier come to you?
Well, atelier is a French word for studio, but it really is more than just an artist studio. It represents a lot of things. For example, the teaching and the training of artists in past times came through a studio, therefore an atelier. And a master would have a studio, for example, the painter Gérôme would have the atelier Gérôme, and people would come and study with him. So the connotation is both an artist studio in which the artist paints and works, but it is also a place in which people can study.
Well, tell me, how is that term used in other parts of the world? Do they use the same term?
Well, yes. Of course, it's primarily European, but it's generally used as it has the dual purpose of both an artist studio and a training place.
And in Italy, how would it be?
Bottega.
Bottega.
Yeah.
Ah, I see.
We're not particularly used to that in this country because most of the art training comes through university or art school type of thing, and rather than the atelier or private studio, if you want to call it that.
What happens to most of your students after they graduate?
Well, we have a 4-year program, and we do have an additional year or 2 for graduate work when painters are working on their own project, and I try to help them in developing. And most of the students, I think we've got a very good batting average. They've stuck with it in the fine arts, which, as you know, is a very difficult field. Portrait painting, painting easel pictures, working through galleries, teaching. In the beginning, usually the artist has to, say, work part-time on some job to earn his bread and butter, and then starts to develop his own style and develop work, and then slowly he can make his art into a career.
How are you perceiving art today as compared to your style, which is more representational, European style?
Sure. Well, first of all, representational painting is, I think, coming back very strongly. It's always been with us, but it hasn't gotten much of the press in the post-World War II period. We live in a postmodern period, and consequently there's a mix of a lot of different styles and approaches. I call it a very eclectic period.
So that anybody can do his own thing or her own thing?
In a sense, yeah. I think that it's wide open now, and I think most people who are interested in art and open-minded can accept the different viewpoints.
Tell me, how are you influenced by Delacroix as compared to, say, Rembrandt?
Well, first of all, I should point out that I come from a great school of American painting called the Boston School. And that flourished from the 1880s right up into the 40s. These were some of our finest painters, Tarbell, Benson, DeCamp, etc. So that tradition is really American Impressionism. So that's influenced me. And then going from there back to their roots in Europe, in the academic traditions, you have people like Ang and David, Jerome, Bouguereau, so on, in the great center of French art, what we call academic. Delacroix is kind of a very individual figure, and his influence has been more indirect than direct. As far as I know, he did not have many students, and he was kind of the romantic.
But he seemed to have so much movement in his paintings.
Yeah. The usual way of looking at that period in French art is the balance between Delacroix, the romantic, and Ang, the classicist. So actually, I was going to say that if we go back to the 19th century and before, I think most of us who work as what we call classical realists, we pick up influences from. And I have favorite painters. My favorite is Rubens.
Oh, really? Well, he certainly did get around, didn't he?
Oh, yes.
But I'm constantly amazed how well he did landscapes and did portraits, because I find that a person who does portraits doesn't do landscapes that well. Do you find that true?
It could be, yeah. To most painters eventually specialize, and there are not too many painters that run the gamut from portrait, landscape, figure, genre, and so on.
I find that there are very few portrait artists around, and they say, and people say, why aren't there? Because I think there is a crying need for fine portrait artists.
Yes. Well, we're training some very good portrait painters.
Now,
I myself, of course, am a portrait painter.
You do that yourself.
Yes.
I'm looking forward to see your work. Now, where does Steve Jertson come in?
He's a former student of mine, and he is now working as his own studio and pursuing his profession. He was one of my earliest students, so that goes back to the beginnings of the atelier.
Let's see. Well, I happened to see his work at the home of Mario Fernandez, you know, who's a wildlife artist. And I must say, I said, that is just beautiful work. And Mario certainly agreed. Let's take a look at the work that you brought in, Mr. Lack. Are we ready to show that? No? Tell us some.
This is, I do myself quite a few different kinds of things. Still life, portraiture, what we call a genre, landscape, and then I have kind of a personal type of thing, which I call imaginative painting. That is, the conception comes from imagination.
Yeah.
This is one of my still lifes, or a section of it. These are painted from nature, so I have to go out and get the material and put everything together and work from the objects. I have a very, I think, very nice studio. I have natural light, a north light. It was designed as a studio. Here's another section of a still life. You
tell us
can see
about that. Do you have an Oriental influence there?
Well, I like to work with different kinds of objects, I think, as all painters do. This happens to be a group of Oriental objects, the Kuan Yin in the center, and then some Oriental plate and vase and so on.
Do you feel that you were influenced by the Japanese as so many of them were.
Oh yes,
Yeah.
the Japanese and Chinese artists, I find them fascinating, especially in their design patterns.
Because quite a few of them didn't have things centered, but I had part of it out of the canvas. Do you find that you're painting on canvas, or do you paint on hardboard?
I sometimes paint on masonite, hardboard.
Do you?
Oh yes.
Do you like that because of this firm?
It's
base?
it's a little different in texture and brushwork, and especially in some of my imaginative, so-called imaginative work, it has a nice texture for glazing.
Mm-hmm. Do you paint only in oil, Mr. Lack?
I do some pastels,
Also?
but just the oil.
Do you ever combine them?
Oil and pastel?
No.
No, you can't
Not
do that.
too well. All right, let's look at the next painting that you have here. All right.
This is a landscape done on the North Shore, right above two harbors. It's an evening scene, perhaps about 7 to 8 o'clock in the summer. And I should mention that myself and my colleagues, we work in what might be called the old-fashioned plein air method, which we actually take the easel out and set up and work from the subject. We want to try to get the colors and the values.
Do you have a problem with winds coming up?
Oh, you bet. Winds and sometimes stray cows and mosquitoes, and in Minnesota wood ticks and also kibitzers. So there's
somebody coming by and say, well, what are you doing? Do you mind if I watch?
Oh, yes.
What do you say?
Oh, I don't mind. It's fine. I recall once I had a couple that were just married. They had a wedding sign on their car, and they screeched their brakes and stopped and ran over to me, and they wanted to take photographs of themselves standing with me by the easel. So they thought they could put that in their wedding album. But most people are very nice, and they're very interested in the painting process. And I talk to them about what I'm doing.
Well, I know I've tried to do that myself, and I had the easel in some sand, and the wind came up and knocked the painting into the sand, and I thought, what is this about Monet painting outside all the time? And I thought, I'd like to be able to talk to him about how did he do that without having these great adventures with wind and sand and dust and
that
things.
happens even, I'm sure, to Monet, although they had weights and they had little guy wires that they could put in the ground. So
did they? Really?
I do that myself.
Oh, really? To keep it? All right,
if I'm working in the mountains, especially with high winds. This also is, this is an autumn scene painted in the western suburbs near a little beyond Chanhassen. And this again is painted on the spot. Now the problem with a picture like this is that you really have to go fast, work rapidly to get the color change.
Yes, certainly.
And you're just praying that the wind won't come along and blow off all the leaves.
Do you ever want to take photographs? You probably frown on it, but sometimes...
I don't use photographs. I like to work with the subject and the feeling of the color, and there's a kind of, difficult to explain, but a kind of interaction between the painter and his subject.
Yes, I can appreciate there's more of a dialogue almost.
That's it exactly. You're right.
All right, let's look at the next one that's coming up. Do you paint just in the state of Minnesota, or do you go to other areas?
For landscape painting, I will often travel. For example, last summer I spent about 5 weeks in Colorado painting the Rocky Mountains area. And I'll occasionally, for example, I'm doing a commission in London, leaving in a week.
Oh, really?
Portrait commission. So occasionally I will do things like that.
Well, so let's talk about this painting that you have here, right here.
This is in Glacier Park, near Lake St. Mary's. Many people will probably be familiar with that area. And this, again, is a morning scene. I was struck by the contrast of the form of the bridge and the dark shadows, and then the distant blue mountains. It was quite a lovely effect. So it was something I wanted.
This was a special kind of bridge?
It's a highway bridge there. It's rather attractive. Most bridges, at least in America, are not that attractive, but I was caught by this one as a rather attractive looking bridge.
All right. And how long will you spend your time in London doing this portrait?
I'll probably be there a month.
Oh, really? So will you spend, say, 3-4 hours a day on a painting?
I'll get sittings, yeah, perhaps of 2.5, 3 hours, and then I might work on it away from the sitter.
Is this royalty that you're doing?
No, it's well, it is a lord. It's a Lord Wilmot.
Well,
so
that's
he's-
royalty.
Yeah,
Well, that's impressive. Well, let's
I
look
should
at this.
say the Earl, 7th Earl Wilmot.
That's really
Getting
exciting.
my
Very exciting.
royalty mixed
Will you
up
come
here.
back and show us this painting?
Well, I'll probably have photographs. Slides of it.
Oh, all right. Let's look at this painting that you just had on here.
This
All right.
is an example of outdoor figure work that I do. This is life size, so it's quite a large picture. This kind of painting is very difficult because you're working with outdoor color, trying to get the feeling of light and color, and at the same time working with a figure. So it's one of the most difficult things that, at least from my experience as a painter, that you can do. And this is a friend of mine that modeled. It's called The Flower Seller. And I like the theme of the colors of the flowers in the foreground, the bright red blouse, and then the hat backlit like that. I thought made a very handsome effect, with especially the color harmony.
Well, you got lovely shadows and reflections on the skirt, too. I like your pattern, your design in the background.
Well,
of,
that's something I work very carefully with in all of my pictures. I try to get a good composition.
You
nice
start.
and patterned.
You start in. Do you make sketches first?
The outdoor things, excuse me, the outdoor things I probably will not. I'd work directly on canvas.
Oh.
The indoor
so you
things,
make
portraits, I would make sketches, yeah.
You sort of make a rough sketch when you're out of doors.
No, I'll take the canvas full size and just set up like the Impressionists did and
I
just
see.
start working away. But that requires a lot of experience. You have to be able to visualize your composition.
Oh, definitely. All right. Tell us about this one, Mr. Lack.
That again is an outdoor figure piece in which the model is posed, in this case in my backyard.
Is this the same model?
No, this is a different model.
I see.
And I liked again, the theme of the light falling on the cloth, the flowers, the light falling on her. It's I think this is
Spattering?
yeah,
I might say a spattering of light.
right. As the Impressionists used to say, the light is the subject of their painting.
Well, that's true. Light and color.
Exactly.
That's very beautiful. These in your private collection, you probably don't want to part with them.
Well, no, that particular picture that you just saw is in a collection here, a doctor in Twin Cities. So I have to make my living selling my paintings. But some things I don't want to part with.
How were you able to get it back from him? The painting to show here. Well, you had to slide.
I had to slide,
I
yeah.
see. And tell us about this one, Mr. Lack.
This is called Morning News, and this is in the studio. This is an interior painted in the studio. And it depicts a young girl watching television. And again, I'm working with, I like the design and pattern of that rather rainbow effect of the
This was her
moment.
costume, and then you
yeah, just
rearranged
like
things too.
If you look closely, you see she has a comb in her hand.
Oh, I see.
It's called Morning News.
And now this was done in oil also.
Yes.
There's different types of oils today. Do you find, what is it called? It's a sort of a substitute for oil.
Yeah, there are, of course, acrylics, and then there's a substitute, something that's very close to oil. That's an alkyd.
Alkyd.
Yeah, alkyd pigment.
What do you think of that?
I don't use that.
You haven't.
I experimented with it, but I
you didn't.
like the feeling of oil.
Have you ever experimented with acrylic?
I've done a little for decorative work, yes.
Well, let's look at this one that you just right here.
That's my daughter. That again is life size. This would be like a genre painting, and it's designed around having, I think, a very attractive young lady.
I can see that.
She's turning a page. It's also called Homage to Paxton, which is the great painter that taught my teacher, Gamble, a great American
Nice.
painter. And she's looking at a book on Paxton.
There's a lovely color green, pastel green in the background. And there's something European in the style of her dress and the style of her movement. You probably posed her that way.
Yes.
Did you ask her to wear that kind of dress?
Oh yes, we selected it after looking at quite a few.
Oh, I see.
Sure.
All right. And this painting?
That's my mother.
Oh, all right.
And it's a kind of a character study.
And
So done
I know
about
she
5
was
years
very
ago.
dark background, so you really were influenced by Rembrandt and his dark background.
I think all painters love Rembrandt, and there's always a little bit of influence.
Because when you put it in that dark background, the colors then become real
You get strong contrast.
colors,
Correct.
and the subject matter becomes far more
Exactly.
impressive. Tell us more about your mother. We passed that one so quickly.
Well, unfortunately, she died 2 years ago, but
Oh.
this portrait was done when she was about 84.
All right.
And so it's one that I have in my own collection, of course.
Oh, well, let's look at this one right here.
Yeah, this comes into the area of what I call my imaginative painting, that is conceptions from imagination. This is called Spiritus Mundi, and it has to do with the relationship between the masculine and feminine principle. As you know, we're living in an
Yin
age...
and yang, you mean?
To some degree, we're living in an age when the feminine principle is coming into being.
Yes.
And I try to depict that by showing these masks rotating. And
I see.
there's the masculine mask on the top, and that's rather rigid and that, of course, is the earth.
Do you feel that if the feminine is becoming more into its prominence, if you want to call it that the masculine then recedes? Or is it more, or do you think it's more of an equality?
Yes.
I'd prefer to see more of an equality rather than see the male recede.
That's probably what will happen. We hope. That's the way it should be.
Yes, where there's...
This is the Metamorphosis of the Gods, which was painted back in the late 60s and had to do with my interpretation of some of the chaos that was taking place in
the
society.
60s.
And but it is on a symbolic level.
Yes, I didn't know you did symbolic paintings.
Yeah.
You're telling a story. You're giving a message.
Right.
I had no idea that you did
I'm
that.
interested in a lot of the symbols that come from transcendental psychology and Jungian psychology.
Do you use what do you call a certain term and make a painting? What do they call it? A certain word and use the painting based on that word?
No, the painting, as a painter, I think in terms of visual symbols. So if I have a concept that I want to carry forward, I, like this, I try to work with symbols that are visual, not...
What are you saying in this one?
Well, that's rather complicated. That's part of a pear.
Oh.
And this is called the silver apples of the moon. The other one is the golden apples of the sun. Comes from a Yeats poem, and here I'm working again with these rather complex interrelationship of symbols representing the masculine and the feminine.
Do you remember the poem?
Well, no, I can't recite it.
But is this part of a diptych?
Yeah, that's true.
I
Yes,
see.
it's two.
So
this represents the feminine panel, and the other one represents the masculine.
And let's see, where is the next one going to be? Another part
That's
of the
the
diptych?
yeah.
All right, let's look at that one.
Yeah, that would be the masculine. That's the two are thought of as a diptych. But the symbolism is quite complex, and I think we'd have to perhaps have more time to
Well, can you
go into it.
touch on it a little bit?
Well, as I say, that one is feminine, this is the masculine, and
What is that up in the upper right-hand corner?
well, since this is the golden apples of the sun, we see a figure that's presenting the protagonist with some golden apples, and then the various images around the rainbow and so on has to do with the masculine associated with light, and the feminine with the moon or darkness.
I see.
these two things coming
do you
together.
think the light that's reversing so that the darkness of women is becoming more of a twilight?
Well, when we say darkness, that does not have a pejorative connotation.
Oh.
It simply means that these are two qualities, and I think, like as many people feel today, that the masculine principle is too rigid, it's too dominant. So we have to, as we are, as obvious looking at our society, we're moving more towards the feminine as a balance, and we think of the feminine. Traditional symbols relating to night and the moon.
I see.
Poets have used that too.
Yes. Let's look at the next one you brought in. Do we have any more?
I guess
That's
the last.
end of it.
That's the
Well,
last
tell
one.
us more about the Atelier LAC. And you have all these students, and they're going to be at this 20th year celebration.
That's correct.
Which is going to be this Friday,
This
just
Friday.
1 day.
And I might, if I could put in a plug,
Please.
those that are interested in coming to our concert can call 934-3251 or 934-3251 or 822-1421 for information.
And he's giving a free,
No, this is a benefit, so it will, there will be a
there's
charge.
a charge.
You can, for those interested, can buy tickets right at the door, and
I
that's
see.
starts at 8 o'clock, Friday, May 18th.
And so he's doing it as a benefit for the Atelier
That's right. It's a
LAC,
fundraiser.
A fundraiser,
Right.
and so you're going to have all your students there, past and present?
Well, there are many that are not in the area. They're in different
I
parts
see.
of the country.
I
But it'd be
see.
nice that if that could happen.
And you're going to London in about
But in a week.
in about a week,
Yes.
and you're going to be gone about a month.
Till the middle of July.
Do you want to take a copy of my program with you and show it there?
Well, why not? I'm sure there's certainly people interested.
I've had some other artists from Europe on the show. Not too often, but this would be different. You're going and showing it there.
Sure, that'd be fun.
Well, I want to thank you so much for being on Accent on Art, Richard Lack. You've been watching Accent on Art. Thank you for being on our program today. I'm Chris Madison, and our guest artist has been Richard Lack of the Atelier Lack, who's going to have his 20th, what do you call it, celebration?
I think it's, 20th anniversary celebration.
And it's going to be this coming Friday.
Yes.
And so anybody can come to the
concert, and then we have an art show at the Atelier on Hennepin Lake, and everybody's invited, and that's Saturday, the following Saturday.
Well, the following
starting
Saturday.
Yeah, the next day, and that's starts at 2
2 o'clock. So anybody's invited to come and see
That's correct.
the art. Well, that's very exciting. I want to thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Richard Lack, for being the guest artist on the Accent on Art.
Thank you.